Hello and welcome to today's live stream. Today we're going to talk about a quite underrepresented topic, in my opinion. We're talking about architecture diagrams, and I'm not doing this alone. I have a phenomenal guest with me. But before we start, let me introduce to you what Tech Leaders Academy is about. So you may be here for the first time and wondering, what are we about? So we are a community of software engineers, data experts, tech leaders, and also engineering managers who are looking for like-minded people for exchange, striving for excellence, and also finding some good sources for their individual career growth. And in order to do that, we are offering live streams like this today. We are offering and organizing open spaces, and we have a training offer. If you want to check that out, go to tech-leaders.academy, where you can find team lead masterclasses, tech lead masterclasses, and other trainings. And regarding the tech lead masterclass, this starts end of October, to be precise on the 27th of October. And we have some free seats left. So if you're interested, check that out at tech-leaders.academy. And now we're coming to today's topic, which is all about architecture diagrams, a topic that is I'm quite passionate about because I love to draw systems and to understand the complexity by visualizing it. And I'm not doing this alone. As I said, I have a great guest with me. I have Christian Bonzelet, who is a solutions architect at DFL. And let's welcome him on stage. Hello, Christian.
Hello, Sebastian.
It's great to have you.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Really looking forward to the session.
I think you're a great guest to get into this topic because you share your experiences on LinkedIn and you also have a blog that you maintain. And actually, it was one blog post that you wrote that I came across and I thought, this is a great topic. We have to do a live stream about this.
Yeah,
So
that's why we're here today.
that's why we're here today. So
Thank God I wrote this post.
yeah. So could you tell us a little bit about yourself, who you are, where you're working?
Yes, I'm like, yeah, you said my name already. The biggest mystery is how to pronounce my last name, but you also resolved this. It's Bonzelet. I'm coming from Cologne, so that's the way how we pronounce it. It's Rheinisch-Kölsch, not French or Belgium in this case. Yes, and I'm working as a solutions architect, AWS Solutions Architect. I work at the DFL. And yeah, some might better know DFL as the company behind the Bundesliga. So we are responsible for organizing, promoting, and marketing the two professional football leagues here in Germany, Bundesliga and Bundesliga 2. And yeah, DFL consists of several subsidiaries. And to be precise, I work at DFL Digital Sports, and we are the content factory, let's call it this, for Bundesliga. We're responsible for owning and operating the official Bundesliga website, the official Bundesliga app, the fantasy manager, and also all the content that is in there. So all the articles you see, all the videos that you see on these platforms, but also on our social platforms. So the Instagram account from Bundesliga is maintained by us, the YouTube channel, and so on. And what only few people know is that whenever you are you watch Bundesliga in other countries than Germany, we are the ones that create the international Bundesliga product. So when you are in the United States and watch Bundesliga, the commentary, the graphics, and the signal that comes out from us. So we're kind of a tiny broadcasting station for the Bundesliga.
So you're basically doing all things tech and digital for the DFL, right?
Basically, so yeah, my role is we call this a shared resource. So I'm not assigned to an individual team or to a single team. I'm basically, whenever a team needs support from a solutions architect, I'm there to help. And my main task is basically helping the teams to navigate AWS, so understanding the services, understanding what kind of capabilities they have. But that's only one aspect of being an architect. So then comes the aligning teams with business strategy, aligning teams with developing the things that make impact. So there's a lot of more of that I learned of that means being an architect than just the technology layer. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. You already answered my next question. So what is the role all about? So we can jump to connecting your role with our topic today. So you are, as a solution architect, are working with diagrams and visualization. So what kind of role do visualizations and architecture diagrams play in your role?
A very important aspect. You phrased it well in the introduction of the session. So a picture is more worth than 1,000 words, basically. And standing in front of a whiteboard and sketching things is really important to share knowledge, to align teams, to get a common understanding, basically, of what we want to build. And this has multiple aspects. So it's not only about putting colorful service icons and some arrows and connecting them together. But I found that creating good architecture diagrams is more than this. It's more than just the shapes and the arrows. And it needs more tooling around this than just your whiteboarding tool, whether it's remote collaboration or in front of a physical whiteboard. And the blog post you mentioned also was an example of how can architecture diagrams not only help in designing the solution, but also help to create a shared understanding, to align the teams towards a common goal, to maybe also tackle complexity, reduce complexity, and have better concrete boundaries. And I'm also big fan of domain-driven design. So all the aspects in there, like creating a ubiquitous language, is something that really became my mental model of my work. And this is also reflected in this whiteboarding tool, or this whiteboard in the end.
So when you compare like written documentation or written design docs to visualized architecture diagrams, what is the ratio in your work? Do you have like more visual representations, or do you have like more in written form?
Yeah, it depends a bit on the audience, I would say. But at the time that I write a lot of stuff, write a lot of words, that's gone. So don't know what's the English words, but in Germany we call this Pflicht- and Lastenheft. So this time is very much so the 90s back in there. I think it's more visual aspects and it's more dynamic. So I'm not a big fan of big upfront design sessions where you close the door for 2 days and try to create something visual and come out and this is my solution. It's like software development in general. It's an agile process. It's an iterative process. So, but the focus is more on, in my work, in my experience, and this is my best practice, basically, is emphasizing a lot of visual work. And I found it also very much easier to rearrange something that is on a whiteboard instead of rephrasing words or sentences. Or so therefore, I'm more the visual guy, I would say. Yeah.
I think that I can totally understand that, because I feel the same. But maybe we are humans also are more like visually driven, because I mean, our brain works like an associative memory, because we can like easily memorize pictures, and it's much harder often to memorize something that is in a written form. Maybe it's just human, maybe it's just us, I don't know for sure. If the audience has an opinion on that, I would be glad to hear that. So please write it into the comments on YouTube, Twitch, and LinkedIn. One thing you mentioned in your blog article is that visualizing is important and helps, but also has some downsides and some pitfalls. Maybe we could elaborate on that right now.
Yeah, sure. I prepared something. I think this is
sure.
a good situation to switch to this, to also onboard the audience who not read the blog post yet. It's basically the idea, or the story of the blog post was basically a real life example from a project that I worked with the team with. So we had a challenge or a project that was basically a typical migration project. It was migrating an identity management solution from one vendor to another vendor. And the special case in this migration project was that tech teams before were not really involved in this because it was a software as a service vendor and it was basically a no-code platform. So you had some kind of widgets that you could embed on your website that have then this sign up or login forms. So very much low technical technical team involvement actually. So there was a product owner that does the things on its own basically. And the main challenge first was, and when I worked with the tech lead of this project, to understand the status quo. And then we did what is typically for such situations is we start and try to draw some boxes and some arrows and try to depict somehow the status quo. And I call this somehow the screaming architecture. So this was really this really huge architecture diagram with a lot of boxes, a lot of arrows, and boxes in boxes, and arrows in different kind of shapes and types. And I call this screaming because this is really screaming for much more space on your canvas, actually. But that's making this exercise was really important because it helped really the power or the value of this was not the diagram in the end, but the conversations around this, the way how we learned in this. And whenever I feel a situation like this, I feel too much overwhelmed. I think this is so much complexity. I don't understand this. I mean, in our pre-call, we also talked about the situations when you come into a room and there are plotted all over those big architecture diagrams. And I always ask, okay, why is this there? I'm more afraid than excited, actually. So what I do is, and what I found very valuable is to zoom out, actually, to maybe use this as a good starting point, but then trying to, whenever I see there's a lot of boxes and a lot of errors, I think a lot about complexity, but this complexity might be, might be not real in the end. Maybe it's just our poor understanding of the domain and so on. And we did exactly this. What we discovered here is that our previous solution, due to the high technical debt and also low involvement of tech people, actually had a lot of complexity in it because we used the systems the wrong way. We had more blurred lines on boundaries, actually, and not those clear separation of concerns. And the story behind this was basically, we had a mix of two domains, actually, or two use cases. We had a mix of newsletter issues or newsletter of newsletter and digital marketing domain and customer identity management domain. So and I asked this, guys, girls, is this really customer identity management what you're talking about? Let's zoom out. Let's forget this for a moment. Let's put this aside that has value, but let's focus on the problem space, not on the solution space where we were previously in. And let's ask this, is this really customer identity management what we understand? And we had the situation that by having really fruitful conversations with the product owners and stakeholders, we found out that there was a concept previously called light and full registration. So the term registration might relate to customer identity management, but what was really behind the curtain was a light registration was basically a newsletter subscription. It was a registration without a password, just for the sake of subscribing customers or fans to a newsletter. And then we started to divide and conquer those domain boundaries somehow. And we thought, okay, we said the one thing is digital marketing and the other thing is customer identity management. Let's now use this separation of concepts and reflect this also in our solution design. And I really like the C4 model as my go-to approach for building architecture diagrams, because the C4 model is, I call it a framework or tooling that gives you the ability to create architecture diagrams from multiple layers. So you can go very much deep onto code level, or you can really create a holistic view and create a so-called context diagram. And the context diagram is basically the highest view, where you just show the system of scope you have in there and the surroundings of this. So what are your actors and stakeholders? what are the systems that are around this. And this really helps to get different kind of perspectives on your solution architecture, and also different kind of meanings and wordings. You get more, I feel that you get with this more structured boundaries by zooming out and focusing on just the one part that you see here in this light blue. The gray ones are just the integration parts or the systems that are surround us, but we are focusing on building this authentication and identity management solution, whatever this is, and it needs to integrate somehow with the newsletter digital marketing system, and it has an integration to our website. And there are two different stakeholders that work with the system, two actors, the newsletter recipient and let's call a customer somehow. And in the next example, in the progress of the session, we will also see that depending on the layer you are in the C4 model, you can use this to create a different kind of specific language or ubiquitous language. That's something that a lot of best practices I learned for my work that works good also for building cloud applications, where this C4 model really is really helpful.
So basically what we have done now, or what you have done now, is you were like pretty much deep into the code, or like call it a UML diagram, for example, and you basically, as you do it in, for example, Google Maps, you zoomed out because you don't know where you are, and you basically want to understand, where am I? So what are the surroundings? What are the actors? What is actually happening around me, right?
Exactly. So don't go into the details of your technical implementation right from start, because this can be, depending on the domain you're in, get very complex, and this can overwhelm you, and you can lose the sight of really the business problems you want to solve, and also for whom you want to solve this. So by looking at this boxes and arrows here, you don't see the customer in the end. You don't see why you're building this. I mean, that has a value in it, and I don't want to say that this is unvaluable, but there are more perspectives on architecture diagrams than just the technical perspective, and this helps really in creating a shared domain knowledge, aligning teams with business goals, or with the responsibilities of a system. Let's call it this, because we found out that our customer identity management solution that we built should not be responsible for any means in terms of digital marketing or newsletters.
So you could also maybe reframe this, reducing the cognitive load and maybe focusing on what is actually important for a certain use case, right?
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. And also, I mean, I like architecture diagrams to be somehow contextual. So there are different kind of audiences you have where you want to transport different things. I mean, when you show this to product managers, business stakeholders, they would look at this and don't get any meaning out of this, because it's not their responsibility to maybe to understand the technical implementation, or whether service A or B is better, or should we integrate it this or this way. They are interested more on, is this really supporting a business case? Is this supporting a use case? And by zooming out, like in this case, we use the language of our business stakeholders. Here we don't speak about webhooks or a message bus. Here we speak about, yes, the customer signs up for an account. So we use intentionally a different kind of language where an architecture diagram can be used to transport an information also to other people.
That raises an interesting question regarding the wording. If you define this level, and this is the top level, right? Because we're talking about 4 levels in total. This is why it's called C4.
Yeah. Yeah.
So when we're defining a wording, does this wording propagate down, or do we try to be completely independent in the kind of wording we're using on lower levels?
Yeah, what I can tell you what I do. I don't know if this is really the idea of the model at all. Because what I've found very valuable is that I use different kind of languages in different levels. Let me maybe switch to a concrete diagram. here, and also remove my doc bar. This is basically, yeah, you said it completely right. So C4, the name is because you have 4 different kind of levels on your architecture diagram. The first one is the context diagram. It should just give you the holistic view of where are you in your overall system landscape, because a system rarely exists in isolation from the surrounding. And what I use, also that we build a lot of cloud applications, I try to adapt the notation of C4, but extending this somehow to be also a kind of transformative for cloud development teams. For example, I sketch a simple AWS cloud group in front of this because I want to show this here. Okay, this runs in cloud, and the other things don't. They are either on-premise, software as a service, or somewhere else. Maybe they are running in AWS, but in a different kind of account. This could be also meaningful information. But here the focus is completely on getting an understanding of what's around us. So what do we integrate with, both machines, systems, and users. And the blue one is really the system in scope. So this is where we can zoom in if we want to. This is the system that the team builds. So when let's assume there are 2 different teams that are responsible for the website and CM, this proxy solution here. I color this different. So when I talk to the team that operates the website, I make this blue because I want to show this is your focus. It's not your focus is not on the system below. So just color notations help here to really get the right focus and prevent misunderstandings of what is the system we're operating in. And I like then, by zooming in, going to the second layer, zooming into this system, I like to use different kind of wordings for what's behind the arrow. Sometimes here, let me zoom in a bit. Here we speak about emitting lifecycle events to an event bus. So what we have here in between this is we are inside of the software system that is called SIAM, and we show the so-called containers that are within the system, where the system, what are the things that the system consists of. We have an event bus, we have a newsletter service, a customer audit service, and a user audit database, for example. And here the audience here is now more technical because I want to be more precise in maybe integration aspects, or maybe things like, does this thing have a native integration to Amazon Event Bridge? Does this thing works with webhooks or has an API we have to actively call? So here I use different kind of languages, but that's just my best practice. I think it's totally fine to also drill this down and use the same wordings that you have in the upper layer. But I think consistency is somehow key in some way, that you understand, the others that watch this understand the intention of this. And where I would like to be consistent is in the naming of the systems we have. So I call the website system still website in here. I call the software as a service CM still software as a service CM here. And the newsletter system is still called newsletter system.
All right. And in addition to consistent naming, you're also using typing, right? Because this is the thing you can basically see below the name.
What do you mean by you mean this
you have like
description
these different
here?
containers, and now we are in the AWS world, and you're basically saying, okay, this on the left top is basically an Amazon Event Bridge, while the newsletter service to the right is basically serverless, maybe a Lambda function or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. So I found it very valuable to, when I know that's a cloud-based workload that runs on AWS, to be then at a certain layer also be very precise. Yes, that is Event Bridge. That's the event bus.
Yeah.
But it's just kind of it's an annotation basically. You can choose whatever you want, what gives value to your team to describe this container. I found with our teams it works very good in naming then the service in this case. But there are like the newsletter service you see here. It's just a serverless container. That can be all or nothing in the end, but the notation or this hexagon in this case, the meaning of this is it's a microservice or it's a service that might be also independently deployed. So here but that's very important. Here we don't speak about deployment artifacts. Here we just to get an understanding what are the building blocks of my system that we have, and to which kind of outer systems do they integrate.
So containers is not a Docker container.
That's very important. Exactly. It can be, but the intention of the C4 model is there are containers. I like this. To be honest, I like this wording not very much because it's kind of, it's like module. That can be all or nothing. So I think it's also if to other listeners in the audience, that's not. I don't want to explain how to use the C4 model in general or how you should use it, but it's more a reflection of my best practices, and whatever works for your team best, whatever helps to create this common understanding and prevent misunderstandings, that's exactly the approach you have to find out. Yeah.
So it's basically best practice guiding principles that helps you to basically, you talked about a ubiquitous language to define your own ubiquitous language for your organization, because one thing that was really interesting when I read the article and then got more into C4 was that I discovered I did this by myself, but I wasn't aware that there is such a model and that it is called C4. So what I used in the past is in order to understand legacy systems is basically drawing them and building out basically architectures out of this. And what I use is, I called it macro and micro architecture. So basically having like two levels, basically understanding what are the business use cases, what do users want to do with the system, what kind of services they interact with, and then diving deep, what you just did here, into an individual service, understanding what are basically the connections to the outside, what are relations, what kind of data exchange happens. And that already helped a lot to get like the business stakeholders and understanding how the system works and how we can develop that system from a certain point. And also to, at the same time, with the micro architecture, have a piece that works to or that is basically the foundation to work with the engineers and give them like better instructions how the system interacts.
Yeah, that's basically the same. So macro architecture diagrams, it's showing the same things in multiple perspectives or multiple depth actually, and that's something where I find this model or similar models very valuable, because it does not end to have this one perspective, but multiple ones. And when we go down to the third level, for example, we see even more aspects of getting different kind of perspectives on an architecture than just service icons. Yeah.
And we got a related question from Sarah. She's asking, like, do you draw multiple diagrams, all with different levels of details for different purposes or stakeholders? Because you mentioned something like that before when we were one level up, right?
Yeah, I do. Basically, I start always with the context diagram. This really helps me to get the holistic view of where are we in our system of systems, because we don't build this in isolation. We always have integration parts. We always have users, customers, fans in our case, that interact with our applications. And who are they? So I don't get this by just going into the specifics of the architecture, into showing combining Event Bridge with Lambda and what else. Therefore, I zoom out, and this helps me very much to not get lost in these screaming architectures. That's my approach that helped me to not really get lost in those nitty-gritty details. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that answers the question that you have like these different levels, but also try to be specific to who you are talking to, right? Because you already mentioned if you were doing this for the website team, you would use a different coloring in order to give them the different context, basically.
Yeah, that's one thing, but also for certain stakeholders or audiences, I stop at a certain level. Also, depending on on the maturity on the project. Maybe just drawing a context diagram helps for some things to really understand, okay, we can talk still about complexity about this, because a lot of integrations might indicate a lot of complexity and a lot of involvement of other teams or considerations. And therefore, maybe there's still value in just creating the context diagram and nothing else. In my experience, a context diagram works really good to sketch this on a whiteboard and discuss with product owners, also other teams or product owners of other teams, in asking, is this the right system that we need to integrate with? And that's kind of obvious that the newsletter system in this case is the right one, but maybe you have different kind of legacy systems where it's not really clear, is this the right one or the other one? There you can have, on a very holistic and broader view, exactly this conversation. And it helps also me actually to have this mental boundary somehow. When I'm in the context diagram, I know that I don't go deeper into the specifics of the implementation details in the end of the system. I know that the focus is more on the integration aspects.
All right. We also got another question, which is more tool related. Vahid asks, what software do you use to create your diagrams?
That's for a long time now I use Draw.io, that you see also here. That works very good because I like it very much, because that you can put in your Git repository and can version it, because it's in the end just a text file. That is really helpful for also capturing changes and these iterations and adaptions. That's my main tool. But in the COVID times where we all sit at home, Miro become so one of the most important tools to really have this real-time collaborations with this. So I have the physical whiteboard in my remote world. After all, I prefer to stand in front of a physical whiteboard because I love the energy of the people. I love the sitting around and having everyone together and thinking about this. And I also think about creating some kind of magnets that I can use to really, because I'm not good in drawing a lambda icon, so but I'm good in putting a magnet on a whiteboard. So maybe this helps to get a bit faster in this.
So thank you, Vahid, for that question, because I also had that on my list. I wanted to ask you later. And my personal experience is quite good with Miro or Miro. I don't know how it's called in English. It works quite well. But I think if you're going to be more technical, Draw.io is also quite good. I used it before. And I know of Lucidchart, which is also a quite sophisticated tool when it comes to drawing architectures.
Yeah. In the end, I need personally something that has, at some level, a good AWS diagrams shape set. Otherwise, I'm a bit lost. Whatever tool works for you works for team. And I like also having the option to have this in my Git repository is really valuable. Because architecture diagrams change over time, of course. And what you see here is also one status quo. Maybe we start with just naming this newsletter service without describing this as a serverless thing. And then you have a change in your architecture diagram. But how do you version this? That's a really, really important aspect. Also, make a rollback, for example, when you do big changes in some experimentations. That's very important. That's good.
So because you're just talking about this, you want to make changes. What I did in my charts is basically use a different kind of notation. So maybe if something is in development or not for certain that it will be that way later in time, I just use different colors in order to notate, okay, this is not actually there, but we may want to do it that way.
Oh, yeah.
But also a way to basically work with things that are not this way already, but that we may suggest to change.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Yeah.
Okay, and I see that we have a third question. Maybe that is a good point right now to talk about this. So Ibrahim, welcome here. He asks, does it make sense to depict a process at a higher level, say the processor and order goes through an e-commerce system? My question is, are processes part of architecture diagrams? If yes, how would you recommend it's represented in diagrams? So basically, I think his question is, we're talking about systems and how they interact with one another, but what is the overall process all about? Is this part of the diagram, or do we basically document that in a different place?
And that's a great question. I would say yes, it's part of a diagram. If it's part of the diagram, I don't know. So maybe you have a different kind of perspective, a different kind of tool that is best in sketching out processes. For example, I like event storming very much. It's very easy to learn notation to depict a business process somehow. So yes, this can also be sit next together to my C4 model. And what I use when I have this, where I played around a bit on the C4 model is also, yes, to use this to show data flows. But this can, depending on the number of systems you interact with or the complexity of your domain, this can be really get out of control. And then you're back to the screaming architecture where you don't see anything but arrows. What I use, but that's just a tooling approach, I use layers in this tool. So every tool like here has different kind of layers, and you can activate and deactivate the layers to show process A or process B. But that's just the tooling approach. But I would say yes, definitely. A process or data flow at certain things is very important. In this case, I made it a bit simple to indicate this like having a numbered notation. So 1 point is, okay, that's the first action, the second, and then, but it depends on the use case, whatever is good for not losing, for keeping control about your architecture games. If there is too much information in this, I would say, take another paper and draw it this way and have it next to your other diagrams. Yeah.
That's really insightful. So to reiterate, you're basically using the layers to show or hide information based on, for example, a certain use case or a certain process, as we just discussed. And so you can basically have your architecture and activate, deactivate certain use cases, for example.
Yeah. Also activate, deactivate certain systems. So for example, when we are just in the classic account sign up domain here, a newsletter service might not be something where I want to put Teams' eyes on. So I simply hide this, and hiding exactly the unrelevant things really gives your teams and myself more focus on, okay, that are the things that are relevant, that are the things that go in version 1 in the MVP or whatever. Yeah.
Okay, so this is basically great to save some time, to have a general architecture diagram that you don't need to basically duplicate, because you can encode more information in one diagram and basically toggle it on and off.
Yeah. What we also do, other teams do, is they create C4 diagrams from a planned UML. So for example, this so the C4 model, this is my tooling for a solutions architect. So when it's in certain phases of the project and it needs different kind of whiteboarding tasks, I would say. But also our development teams use this to have planned UML integration that then renders a C4 model. So then you have basically this, what you deploy with infrastructure as code is described in the planned UML file and is uploaded to a documentation page that we have where our teams can get an understanding. And the cool thing here is that with such an approach, you can link containers and can link the system. So when you are on the context diagram, you can click on the context and it opens up a link to the second layer. And when you click on the newsletter service, you go in deeper. So you always have the link and the backlink and can navigate in this tool. That's something what I did not implement here, because it's just a different kind of approach, different kind of audience, where I don't need this back reference here. Yeah.
But it's quite powerful, right? If people can basically discover the system just by clicking through the individual components like containers and context and so on.
Absolutely, yeah.
All right. I think you were about to show the next level, right? Because we interrupted for some questions, so thank you for the questions. If you have more, just drop them in the comments. but I think we can continue from here on.
Yeah, exactly. So the next layer in the C4 model is called the components layer. So it's basically the same pattern. So you click on one of the blue things and you zoom in into this. And my best practice for this here is, in this case, I break out of the typical notation of C4 because I found here in this case be very valuable to talk or to visualize AWS icons and their integrations, but not just the icons. I will show you this in a minute, but this helps really, if I'm here more abstract and keep up the C4 notation, very AWS mature teams have to always translate the abstract notation into a service icon. And there's that every translation from one language to another is some kind of cognitive load that costs energy. And I want to prevent our teams from spending this energy. And therefore, here in this label, I found my own notation. Oh, it's not my own notation, it's basically the AWS service icons we have here. But there are certain maybe notations on AWS architecture diagrams that I found very helpful. And I rarely used it in the past, but I learned to use it when we have more bigger systems that have more than just a Lambda function. So for example, by having this, again, the same namings referred into this as well. So we have the event bus here that references to the container, and we have the audit service that references to the service container and the previous layer. And here I then use something, I like to work with these embedded things. I like to work to grouping things. So for example, event bridge, just dropping the service icon is, EventBridge is so much, it has so many capabilities, but what exactly out of EventBridge do I use in this situation? And what is everything behind, what's the implementation detail of my event bus? Because my event bus, from a logical point of view, is not just activating EventBridge, it's more. In our case, it's a custom bus, it's a message store, it's a rule that logs for debugging purposes everything to CloudWatch, for example. And here you can be very much precise in what does your EventBridge setup, let's call it this way, or your event bus container consists of in terms of different kind of resource icons. So that's the one aspect. And the second aspect also, when you see something that is not an AWS icon here, which is an enterprise integration pattern notation, which is really powerful to give more intention of your architecture diagrams when it comes to integration aspects. Because again, just putting EventBridge pipe in here, that's too abstract. So what does the pipe actually do besides just receiving an arrow and giving an arrow back, right? You have a queue, and basically what I want to show or what to highlight and emphasize with the teams is that we have an enriching feature. So we have the pattern of a content enricher feature, because the events we get from the software as a service vendor just contains an ID, for example, for the user, but we want to capture certain, we want to get certain profile data to create a more meaningful audit. So hence we need to enrich this event that we have with something from external content, and it's then making the API call towards a fictional get user API, for example, and it's implemented as a Lambda function. So here I have both perspectives. I say I have a Lambda function in my pipe that is an implementation of my content enricher in the end. And this gives, in my experience, so much more meaning and depth of your architecture diagram and the integration aspects than just having the service icon or just having a resource icon in the end. Because I can then also say, yes, the content enricher, in this case, the Lambda function, fetches the API and dumps the thing, the enriched event, then in our raw data bucket. So the same pattern here. S3 can be multiple things. I have the bucket, but I also have a bucket policy, for example, where I would like to have more controlled access on my bucket.
So the challenge, but also the solution, is to find the right level of detail. So you could basically use the AWS standard icons, but they wouldn't tell the whole story.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Exactly. Yeah.
that's basically the challenge here in order to communicate the right thing, the right use case, the right process, as we heard, or basically, the right data flow.
Yeah. And that's don't not to misunderstand this. It's totally okay to start with the service icon. That's the starting point. But then somebody like me asked this question, okay, what's behind this? I mean, EventBridge can be all or nothing. Is it a bus? Is it a pipe? Is it an API destination? If it's a pipe, what's in there? So we can drill this down and be very much precise. And but it's totally okay to start with the service icon. But if you want to create more meaning behind this, then start to drill this down, because the other developer that gets hired 2 months in the future, that just sees the service icon but not the meaning behind this.
Yeah. Great. So now we got like 3 levels. The first one is context, the upper one. Then comes container. Not to confuse with Docker containers.
Yeah.
Then comes components. This is what we see right now. And I think the last one is also with C, it's code, right?
But that's the level where I stop.
Okay, and it's not actually code, right? Because you're not watching or having code, because you use a visual representation again, something like UML.
Yeah, or pseudocode, something like this. Maybe it could be also code that is created from tools. I mean, GenAI has a lot of great capabilities. Who knows? Yeah, but then the idea, I think, of this layer is to also provide this perspective of your architecture, of your design, of your solution. And for me, speaking about domain-driven design and ubiquitous language, the power of this is: do I have a connection in my code to my upper layer? Is the thing named audit service or different things? So having a consistent naming maybe is key, but I found in my role it rarely useful to go on to level 4, because that's, for me, too much detail. But that does not mean that it's not helpful for you. Feel free to check this out. Whatever is valuable and creating more meaning, that's exactly the level of detail you then need.
So what I learned now, you basically explained what the C4 model is about. It's basically about zooming out, finding the right level of detail, and also understanding which audience actually needs which level, because you have different audiences for each level, I guess. But you shouldn't stick too much to the rulebook. Same as you maybe have for example, with Agile. You have like a Scrum guide, but you don't need to follow it 100%. It's basically giving you good guiding principles.
Yeah, and I think overall consistency is key somehow. So having some kind of consistency for my own architecture diagrams. So right now, people see that I was involved in creating these architecture diagrams because I have like writing code. So when you work closely with your colleagues, you see from the type of code what developer wrote it or not. Same for architecture diagrams, and this really being consistent helps me, but also over time our teams, because we know what a content enricher is. And we know that we have these kind of features or not in this integration part. But exactly, sticking too much to the rule book. I mean, there's always room for improvement. I could write some labels on the arrows itself. You have to find the right balance. You have to find also the right time you can spend in those architecture diagrams. In the end, it's just a tool, right? It's not something that I paint my walls with. It's something that, yes, has maybe something, some aspects of documentation, but the really power is on the collaboration between this and the discovery you have with your team and the discussions you have along creating these things.
Yes, that's because you're talking about these walls of like diagrams. I have the experience that software engineers, software developers start to click the auto-generate button, and then you have like these hundreds of classes interacting with one another, but it's not giving you real something valuable. because you have this architecture, but it's really difficult to basically understand how two classes interact with one another. For me, if I'm in my IDE, I can basically just go basically into that class and have a look at it. It's sometimes or often faster than looking at the diagram. So it's really important to reduce the cognitive load to what's actually what you actually want to talk about or what your use case is all about.
Yeah, absolutely.
So because we're coming to the end of the stream, maybe we could both just summarize some best practices for the audience when it comes to drawing architectures, when it comes to visualizing code, and also for the audience, please share what you learned so far and maybe your best practices. So Christian, do you have some ideas what you would like to emphasize on for everybody?
Yeah, I think what everybody could try out is getting one architecture diagram that you have in your wiki or whatever in your code repository. Take this and make the first step in zooming out. Out of this, based on your understanding, and maybe you can also involve some team members, zoom out and try to get this first layer, and maybe try to find connections. To really try to consider this as a process to create this kind of language. And then, yeah, learning by doing, actually. So it took me a long time to really get my way of drawing architecture diagrams, and also don't forget to get feedback from your teams. So in the end, I don't make this for my own. I don't make this to be proud of having a colorful architecture diagram. I make this for making our teams better. So getting the feedback from the teams, whatever is valuable for them, is really crucial. So don't forget this, and then find your way in this, and try to be, try to really try to look at the things from different perspectives, I would say. So, and yeah, it's an iterative process. So maybe in the end, an architecture diagram is a model, and it can evolve over time, a model of your system. And I like this quote: "All models are wrong, but some are useful." So it takes you a lot of steps to get really into your way of designing this.
Great. So I would like to add that you shouldn't stick too much to the standards. I think standards are a great way to get started, to understand what could be a box be used for, what could be a line used for, what could be a dash line, what could be a solid
Yeah.
line. That's great to start with. So have a look at UML, have a look at entity relationship diagrams, flowcharts, and so on. But you don't need to stick to them. Every organization is quite individual in what they build. Their domain is quite specific. So try to develop your own, you called it ubiquitous language. You can also find the analogy to domain-specific languages. Just try to develop your own. Try to make the best that works for you and your organization.
Yeah. Well said. And be consistent in some way. I mean, it's all arrows are solid in this case, but once you introduce a dashed one, you have to explain what's the difference between them. And for once, it could be expressed, okay, the one is asynchronous communication and the one is synchronous communication. Whatever it is for you, maybe kind of a legend helps to express this, so that everybody needs less translation work into understanding the architecture diagram. And yes, having your own standards in the company based on a C4 model, based on, like you expressed, macro or micro architecture, that's exactly the way you have to find in your company and working with the team. So create your own standard that works, and be consistent with it.
Yeah, great. So Sarah also mentioned something. Well, there she is. So her takeaway is basically try to address different groups with different levels of detail. She will try it out. And also, what comes to my mind is the grouping you were talking about. You have like these rectangles where you try to group similar things or maybe a certain domain or something. That is also quite helpful, I guess. And one thing that always was helpful to me is start with basically shapes and then add color. This is also because you have some people being colorblind, so be careful with the colors you choose, like red or green. Start with shapes because shapes can be perceived by everyone. And even if you have like a printer that is just printing out grayscale, you can basically understand what the story is all about. And if you have some additional information, you can maybe add colors.
Yeah, yeah. And I think also AWS has a color system behind this. I think compute is orange, green is storage in the end. I don't know what's but they are consistent in some way. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that's right. Okay. We got the comment from Alexander. Thanks for the great talk. Comes at the right time. Okay, that seems to help him. That's great. So, Christian, before we end, would you like to? Oh, there's another one. Yeah, could we have access to these diagrams, Christian?
Yeah, of course. So these are not. That's not. Also, just to be clear, that's not our Bundesliga implementation. Yes, I can share this, but it's close to the project I had, and yeah, Sebastian, we will figure out how to share this with the audience somehow.
We can definitely share your blog post in the comments later on, so everybody can have a look at it. And before we end, would you like to have like a closing statement?
Closing statement. Go out and draw awesome architecture diagrams. And maybe I would be very happy to get your feedback also. What kind of things helped you? What are your approaches? Really, yeah, extend the discussion on LinkedIn, YouTube. I'm mostly active on LinkedIn, so that's where you find me. So feel free to reach out to me and also share your best practices and standards.
All right, great. So please, if you're watching this later on, you can still put a comment down there. We will read it. We can interact with you even after the talk. So if you have questions and inspirations, just let us know. And it was great to have you here, Christian. It's a really passionate topic. I love to talk about visualizing like complexity and code. And maybe I'm doing another session because I really love to use Miro for it. Maybe I'm going to share my experience because now I saw how you do it with Draw, or maybe it's interesting for the audience to see how you can basically do something similar in Miro.
Absolutely. I would tune in.
Great. All right. Thank you very much for your time. It was great to have you here. Thank you for sharing such a valuable information with us. And have a great afternoon.
Thank you all. Thanks, Sebastian. And yeah, great day so far.
Bye-bye.